many people have never even had to work from the office. So this is it's not even a disruption. It's a change of your lifestyle. And that's tough.
Gen Z acquired during the remote work era, their salaries did not reflect all of that taken time. You have to decide, do you want to make enough money to put it into savings and do a little side hustle, or do you want to be healthy? And like a lot of people can't afford to do both.
But I think companies could really benefit from saying, does this employee really need to be in the office?
Also really important to adapt, just accept the way that your current situation is playing out.
Life comes at you quick. How do you prepare yourself for a career that you can't even imagine yet? That's what Cam and I will delve into each episode on future-proofing your career. Cam, a retired professor, memoirist, and CPA, shares insights from his dynamic professional life, while I, a recent graduate and a young professional, voice the concerns of the next professional generation as we try to navigate a rapidly changing market. Learn how to arm yourself with an open and informed mentality that will take your career to the next level.
Welcome back, everyone. It's me, Lexi and Cam, and we have another episode for you today. We want to talk about the return to office calls that have been going out across North America. After the pandemic, we were all very comfortable in our homes, working away, maybe from bed, maybe from the couch. Maybe you were privileged enough to have a home office, but we got comfortable. And all of a sudden, all of our companies were calling us back. And we had to readjust to something that was normal for decades before. So today, Cam and I want to talk to you about that. We have two really interesting perspectives because Cam's default and normal is obviously working in office. And mine, as someone who graduated during the pandemic, is very much working from my ginormous pink armchair in my pink office at home with my cat on my lap. And I have to go back to the office in the fall. This will be good practice for me as well. Cam, do you want to tell us a little bit about what your experience was working in the office?
Sure. You touched on it, that it was the norm for me in the 90s and through the early 2000s. Is pretty much, we never thought of work from home as an option. And I started work in the real early 90s before the internet and email were even around. And that makes me feel a little antique talking to someone like you. But what it does is it gives me perspective on things, because I think back to those days. And of course, I never liked the commute to work, that, especially in the winter. But otherwise, I found office life to be fine, generally speaking. And it got to the point sometimes where even if I hated my job, or, it wasn't going well with the work or the boss, I liked who I ate with at work. I liked playing baseball and volleyball. And so there were other things that made work life actually beneficial. But again, I say that from a perspective of someone who didn't have a comparison, right? Work from home was not a thing. So now, though, I do understand this RTO issue, because my university teaching has shifted from in the classroom to Zoom-like tools. But yeah, you really get used to that. And like you said, your pink chair and the cat, you get used to saving that time from the commute and the stress and the hassle. And life can be much better when you work from home. So I do get that now as a university instructor. I can't imagine having to put the suit on again and go back in the classroom. So even though I didn't grow up that way, I'm right there with you. So I'm just basing it on a small sample. Most of my life has been work from the office, but now I get it with my small sample. But for you, Gen Z, like you specifically, Lexi, and your cohort, this is not a small sample size for your life. This is your career. I mean, for most of you, many people have never even had to work from the office. So this is it's not even a disruption. It's a change of your lifestyle. And that's tough. That affects you in so many ways. It upsets the homeostasis that we're all trying to create for ourselves to reduce our stress and improve our mental health. And so that's why this is a really important topic for us to cover, is we want to make sure that people have the best means for the homeostasis and the best mental health possible. And I'd like to hear the kinds of specific Gen Z issues and concerns that you have, that you're hearing from your cohorts.
The main concern that I've heard is that people are noticing how much free time companies are taking from employees when you transition them back into office. Because currently, we'll use me for the kind of example here. Currently, I wake up and all I have to do is get one room over from my bedroom and I'm at work. I don't need to, especially like as a woman, put on my makeup. I don't need to get dressed if I don't want to, do my hair, any of that stuff to look what is considered like presentable. I don't need to pack a lunch, get in my car, drive, pay for a car, drive, go to office. If I didn't pack a lunch, I don't need to pay for a lunch while I'm out because I don't have access to a kitchen. And then I don't need to sit in rush hour traffic to get home again. All of that extra stuff that was considered normal before is now not considered normal. There's this argument that, okay, well, we did that before, so you can do it now. Fine. But a lot of these jobs that especially Gen Z acquired during the remote work era, their salaries did not reflect all of that taken time. So for me, for example, I'm working a 9 to 5, have now transitioned into a permanent role, but before I was working a contract role. And so I was also serving in the evenings because I didn't have job security. And so I wanted to make sure that if I didn't get a permanent position at my current company, I still had part-time employment after and didn't have this weird unemployed time in between jobs. What would have happened if I had to go in office is that I wouldn't have had time to get from my contract position at the office to my serving position for dinner time, which I was able to do while working from home. And I also would have had to buy a car without job security. What ends up happening there is all of these factors that are considered normal and were considered normal were not factored into what I was negotiating for my salary. I didn't negotiate in based on the fact that I would need a car or that I would lose like a good portion of my income from serving. I just negotiated in for that one isolated sitting in my office and working from home. And so that's really frustrating for a lot of people who are now getting told they have to go in office because all of a sudden hours are evaporating from their day and they didn't account for that in what they're getting paid. It's also frustrating because so many of us can't actually afford to plan for our futures with the salaries we're being paid, especially after we've been put into debt from really expensive school and all of that. And then rent prices, at least like in Waterloo and Canada specifically, are so high. And so we can't put money into savings. And so a lot of people are working these extra jobs. And then once you have to go in office, again, those like valuable hours at the end of the day are just evaporating with commuting and even fitting in going to the gym and like being active. You know, you have to decide, do you want to make enough money to put it into savings and do a little side hustle, or do you want to be healthy? And like a lot of people can't afford to do both. So yeah, I think those are little things that previous generations didn't realize. And then even looking more broadly, just socially speaking, a lot of these in-office jobs for a lot of people were dependent on the 2-person household model. And we don't have that anymore. It's not the norm that someone's at home taking care of having food ready and all that stuff. And so obviously that's not the case across the board. And it wasn't the case across the board before, but there's just so many less people now that are married at a younger age. And so people are having to look out fully for themselves. And so the working from home was fantastic because you got to take care of yourself in place of a spouse taking care of you while you were working. And the return to office disrupts that again. So it just makes it just a little bit trickier to be single, which is a really common status right now. That's kind of my dump observation of what's going on right now and why people are mad.
Thank you for so many good points. And time being the biggest piece that upsets the homeostasis. That totally makes sense. And when you were talking, I remember now, in my day as a 20 something, I got the job and then I decided where I would live to be close to work, right? As to minimize my commute. But what I'm hearing you say is a lot of people interviewed, the place might be much further away. You didn't really think about that because it's a work from home job, and now they have to go commute to that place. So that is a tough one for sure. And the time it takes for the commuting, plus the time you mentioned other, things, getting prepared in the morning. That's a tough one. And I can't see a quick solution to that. I don't know how a company makes that up to its employees. What do you like if you could wave a wand or ask for a company to somehow compensate for this disruption? What kinds of things come to mind?
More money, honestly, because it's a matter of just there not being enough. I think there's tons of articles that you can look up about the cost of the return to office that's placed on the employee, and it's thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
And every office is going to say something like, oh, it's so amazing that you get to return to office and collaborate. There's no sort of soft compensation that you could give somebody that makes it worth it unless that person actually wants to go in office. And there are tons of people who do. Like, I have lots of friends who admit that they would be fired if they worked from home because they just can't like manage their time in that way if they're not in an office that's catering towards them working. So they go in office because it's just better for them. Or there's lots of people that's mental health is way better if they're in office and around people. I'm not one of those people. And I also am not set up in a way that it is convenient or easy for me to get into office. Companies can push all those soft things like there's chips in like our office always, there's chips in office. And it's like, okay, so you want me to come into office and eat a bunch of junk food every day and then leave? Like, that's also not like I'm giving up going to the gym every day during my lunch break to come in and eat chips. Do we not see the issues here? Like, that feels completely counterproductive to what any health person is saying right now. So, anyways, it's just things like that where they push all of these random or cheap things that they just are putting in place of making it seem like it's a good deal and everyone can see through it and they know it's not. I think the hybrid approach really is going to be the best, and not hybrid in the sense that every employee is required to go in every single day, but hybrid in the way that my company was running before RTO, which was the office is open and lots of people do go in and you can go in whenever you want. You can go in at any time. When you do come in, there's going to be food. Sometimes they would hold like event days and almost everyone would go in for those and hang out and everybody knew each other. So there were lots of opportunities to come to office. We have Slack channels where people would post and say, hey, I'm coming from out of town. What's good stuff to do in Waterloo? And then like tons of people would get together in the evenings if people were coming down for these company events and things like that, where it was the team environment still existed, but people who didn't want to go in office didn't have to. And so lots of people willingly went into office. Like, I don't have air conditioning, and on particularly hot days, I would go into office and it was fun. I think that's the ideal. But if you're going to force people in, I think there needs to be salary renegotiations. Ultimately, if people made their negotiations during remote work and we're not simply remote because of the pandemic, but we're remote employees, which is what I was and a couple of my coworkers were. They were fully remote employees who were told they had to go back in office, which was not the deal when they negotiated their contracts. Those people need to be able to renegotiate and account for gas, cars, insurance, time wasted, commuting, all that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. There's no right or wrong ways to do these, but there are better and worse ways to do this, right? And you unfortunately experienced some of the, I would say, the not so recommended ways. That was my first thought. Salary increase, I can't argue that, of course, but your boss certainly will. So I just had a couple of thoughts as you were talking. These came up as just food for thought. Is what about reduced hours? Like instead of an 8-hour day, it's 7, to say, hey, you know what? We know we've put a real time drain on you here, and you know, upset your homeostasis. We'll kind of try to soften the blow with a 7-hour day. And I know some managers, some of my colleagues will be saying, are you out of your mind? And to them, I would say, well, you know, recent research shows that workers on average work about 3 productive hours a day. So why don't you offer them some kind of something to show you care and that they matter, uh, and see if they, you know, even in the 7 hours, they can get 3.5 to 4 productive hours because they appreciate things you've done for them. And maybe you do more than that. So that was just a food for thought idea that popped up. Something else as you were chatting about your friends who wanted to go to the office, the question comes up in my mind, do they have to go back to work? So we'll talk about you for a moment. Is your job one that you really truly need to be in the office 5 days a week, or are they just doing that so they don't have to pick and choose between employees? And why I'm saying this is I think you can renegotiate contracts to say, you know what, this is a job that requires you to be in the office. And that's the way it is. It's like when Cam was young, this is an office job. And I don't like, let's say it's an HR facilitator, an onboarding, you know, you need to be with the new employees face to face. Okay, that's an in-office job. And it can be, now that we're back to work, it can be written in the contract. But I think companies could really benefit from saying, does this employee really need to be in the office? And maybe, well, for, you know, there's meetings and stuff. So for 2 days a week, yes. But the other 3, they can work from home. And you know, and maybe it's case by case, but you put it right in the job description, and everyone's salary is aligns with it.
When you adjust for the people who have to go in office and don't, I think it's a great way to go about it. And my company was doing that. We had all of our software engineers had to go in, and we're always in office. And that was never really an issue. It was just expected that, yeah, if you're an engineer, you need to be in office and working with people. And it was actually the RTO that ended up disrupting that. And I think what also has bothered people is that there's a limit to who's involved in the RTO. So if you're outside of a certain radius, you don't have to go in. And then what happens is, like, for you saying that you have to go in person for meetings or whatever, for my team at least, and for most of my company, that doesn't even factor in as a reason why we'd have to go in person, because most of my team is not within the radius to have to go in office. So there's 3 people who are sitting in the office and forced to be there. And they're also having to take meetings over Zoom with the rest of the team, because most of us aren't even in person. Like, I don't have to go in person until the fall, but the rest of my team, who's been permanent this whole time, had to go back in last winter. They've been there, just the 3 of them. And all of their collaboration with the team is still online. So it's those sorts of things where it's just obvious that the company felt there was real estate wasted and wanted to fill it. Mm-hmm. And that is a really frustrating thing to come to terms with. The level of being a well-balanced human being. Like, it's not even lazy or pampered to say that you want to work from home, because, like, we're still working for the whole day. We're still maintaining these really high level jobs that we needed 1 or 2 degrees to get. But it was just the ability to, like have a good meal at the end of the day, go to the gym at lunch and wake up at a normal hour, be with their families, do basic like household tasks that don't need to get pushed then to one day of their weekend that just kind of disrupts their whole rest period. Like all of those things are just what allow you to be a balanced human being in the rest of your life. And they are taking it away for arbitrary reasons. And that's quite frustrating because, yeah, at least like for my job, there is legitimately no benefit to me being in office. It's actually a detriment to the quality of work I'm going to produce. People have watched their productivity plummet, their ability to focus plummet, so much wasted time trying to find a place to just have a basic meeting.
Yeah, that, I said earlier, there's no right or wrong, there's better or worse. And I think we know which side this leans toward. Yeah, that's a mess. And you brought up a good point about filling the space, right? Because to advocate for companies, if they signed a 10-year lease in 2019, right, for an X number of employees or X number of floors in an office building, you're locked in for 10 years. And so they would have all been empty, right, during the pandemic. But the thing about those lease costs is it's a decision that at the time it was made was a good decision. But you have to rethink things now. And an empty office floor, to me, if I've got employees who are happy working from home, that sounds a lot better to me than an overcrowded office floor that you just described that's stressing people and obviously causing disruptions to meetings.
We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the more positive aspects of going in person. I think it's really easy, especially with all the external influence we get online about how RTO impacts mental health and the ability to be a full human being during the day and all of those things. It's so easy to have this collective negative outlook on it. And I absolutely encourage that type of critical thinking and really assessing why these structures are in place. And it is important to assess and think about why things are the way they are and can they change to be made better. But at some point, too, it's also really important to adapt and just accept the way that your current situation is playing out. It's a lot of work to be miserable all the time. Cam and I will tease out a couple of the ways maybe that you can positively approach this return to office and make the most of it. So Cam, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the positives that you found from going in office, and I can maybe project into the future and see if I see any positives.
Yeah, I'd like to bounce something off you, see, just get your take on it. Because you made a good point. Like you and I are talking about increasing salary, reducing hours. It's just not going to happen in most cases, right? So there needs to be some other way to make employees look forward to coming to work. I guess I'm talking more from a managerial point of view, and that complements your new to the workforce, like new in your career point of view. So I want to share a story. Many years ago, about 20 years ago, I was at the University of Waterloo and I was involved in a great master's program for entrepreneurs, which is still alive and very successful. The very, very first week of that program, it was like our orientation week, and it was really taxing on the students day and night, meeting new professors and books and all that, a lot of heavy stuff. So by Friday, they were very burnt out. And I was in charge of the week. So I had this little tiny budget to work with. And I thought, how do we end the week after, putting them through such grueling stuff? And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange a mini golf setting where they play mini golf, not just with each other amongst the students, but I'm going to bring the professors too, and they get to know them. And the teams were all mixed. So professors were on teams with students, it wasn't profs against students. And then there was a dinner, like a really early dinner, 5:00 type dinner. And that was such a successful day for the money, like the value for the money. And so I can hear a lot of my colleagues saying, well, you had budget. You said you had budget. I don't have budget for that. It's like, can't you find a bit of budget, even in the development of people, because this is the development of people. It contributed so much to collaboration and community. And it finished that week with such a warm feeling for everyone that I wanted to share that. And it wasn't an expensive afternoon, mini golf. I booked the mini golf for a couple of hours and then dinner. And so if managers could even find the budget for that, just to give employees something to look forward to, and make work not just about work. And so I don't have any solutions to this RTO. I wish I did, other than all these food for thoughts we're coming out with. But I thought I would share that story about how just a few hours on a Friday afternoon really made a difference. What do you think if your boss said that you were going to do that kind of thing once a month? Not always mini golf, but something fun once a month.
Again, it kind of goes back to those soft compensation ideas that me personally, I don't gravitate towards, and I think a lot of Gen Zs don't gravitate towards it all either, because we know that it's not maybe coming from the best place. However, the idea that you put it together and it wasn't coming from higher ups to like compensate for something, it was something to look forward to, I think is valuable. And I do take care of team events within my team and just create these little, sometimes free, sometimes not, events throughout the month that give people something a little extra to look forward to. And I think they are beneficial. I think people do look forward to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it really depends on who that activity is coming from and what the purpose of it is. I know there are sometimes events that trickle down from corporate way high up that don't serve the people because they're not close enough to the people to know what they'd want to do. So those are a bit different. Gen Z are getting really good at noticing that intent and thinking about that intent. We're being critical of it in a way that maybe other generations haven't been so much in the past. To kind of look at this in the positive ways to go about returning to office from not a management perspective, but from an internal perspective as an employee who's being sent that way. At the essence of what Cam was talking about is just something to look forward to and something to do that makes it worth it to go in office. And on the personal level, and I think this will be kind of funny for our older listeners, because I know for millennials, they often hear, oh, the reason you don't have any savings or any of that is because you're buying $6 coffees all the time. What I would say is that for me, when I go in office, I do have a little bit of fun, like putting on a fun little outfit, and I'll stop for a little treat on the way into office, and I'll enjoy seeing my coworkers, and I'll make it in some ways a little bit of a social event. And obviously that's not feasible when you're going in either every day or 3 days a week for a hybrid one, but it's those little opportunities to make it feel worth it in your brain that I think can be really beneficial to reframing the whole, well, I have to go into office. Like, what are the positives about going into office? What can you extract enjoyment from when you go in? And then maybe that can make it feel less of like a demand. And again, I want to really push the point home that I think it is important to always be evaluating why things are happening the way that they're happening, and not being a passive participant in your life, but it's that balance of thinking critically and changing what's changeable. But in a lot of ways too, if your goal is to make a certain amount of money and your job is serving that, then you have to decide if it's worth it to go in. And if it is worth it to keep that job and then you have to go into office, how do you reframe that to make it enjoyable? Because the only thing that would be worse is going in miserable or like giving away all of your happiness to this job and having to go in person. Like, that would suck. Finding some things that will give you joy when you go in, enjoying the walk, enjoying getting out of the house, or even really savoring how relaxed you feel when you come home. Like, for someone who works from home, I do not get the same level of relief when I sit on my couch at the end of a work day, because it's just not the same as when you come home from a work day and you get to unwind and feel fully relaxed. There's little things like that that you can just seek enjoyment from and train your brain to really appreciate. And I think that can be key if you don't have that managerial power that Cam's talking about at this point in your career.
Yeah, those are really good thoughts and good ideas. And I'm going to go back to the average productivity of 3 hours a day. If I was a manager, I'd be really creative right now to say, how can I add 1 hour of enjoyment to their day? The theory is the morale will boost so much that they'll go from 3 hours average to 5 hours. If I give them 1 hour of something enjoyable, whatever that is. I think creativity is one of the keys here to making this work for companies without spending a lot more money.
Agreed. Creativity and flexibility too. I know within my team, one person actually goes into work at 6 a.m., I think, so that they can leave by 3. And it's because they're within the radius of having to go into work, but they live in Cambridge. And so all of a sudden they've added this 45-minute commute on the highway to work every day. And so she finds it really beneficial for her to skip rush hour every day, even though it takes waking up extra early. And then she gets her afternoons back. And so that was her way of making it doable. That kind of flexibility from corporate, if that's what you need to do to be in office during peak meeting times or whatever on the days that we're in office, then you're able to do that. I think that's really valuable as well. Like for me, that would be huge to be able to go to the gym. I am not looking forward to giving up my lunch gym hour. And so what might end up happening is that I take an hour and a half to 2 hour lunch every day and either go in early or stay late. That way I'm still meeting the number of hours, but I'm not having to tag the gym on after a long work day.
Just to add to what you're saying is, let's ask the employees, what would soften the blow? I think the key is for managers to make it feel like they're working with the employees on getting this transition done, not doing it to the employees. And that's probably how you feel, most people, is that this is how, this is being done to them. And in a way it is, but is there a way of softening that so it's more like we're transitioning with you? And that creativity, flexibility, these are going to be very important in doing that.
Yeah, you keep mentioning too the shorter workday, and even I think it's being floated around quite a bit around the world. A lot of companies are trying just a 4-day work week, because what I was talking about before with how family structures and household structures are changing a lot now, with a little bit with millennials and with my generation especially. We don't have somebody that we're coming home to who's taking care of all of the household duties. When it, like I was saying, gets pushed to, okay, Saturday or Sunday becomes your day of resetting your entire house, that makes your weekend kind of a write-off, because you have your one day to decompress and unwind from being in office all week, and then the next day you have to clean everything, grocery shop, get all your meals prepped for the rest of the week, and blah blah blah. And then suddenly you're effectively working a 7-day work week because you just haven't had any time to socialize. The 4-day work week model would be really interesting, because then you get that day to decompress, day to socialize, day to reset. And that might be really helpful for how our social and household structures are changing. And
I'm hearing really good things about the 4-day work week. I haven't delved into the research, so I'm not, taking a definitive stance. To your point, I think that's something. There's the creativity, is 4-day work week, and you can do that and still be open Monday to Saturday if you wanted. You just, different employees work different 4-day work week, 4-day weeks. And that, to me, to have 3 days and without the company losing any productivity from the employee, which is what they're worried about, I think that's one of the most creative ways to not increase salary and not lose any productivity. So yeah, really good point, Lexi.
From what I've seen in articles as well, is that the 4-day work week actually increases productivity and people are more inclined to work full hours in a day because they know they actually have a break coming. Whereas, like, with the 5-day work week and then not enough time in between to decompress, people are largely unproductive on Fridays and really slow to start the week on Mondays. And so you just kind of have these 2 days that are just nothing days because you're exhausted. Whereas you give people enough time to relax, they're actually going to come in ready to do their job. If you've been listening to a couple other of our episodes, you know that at the end of every episode, we wrap up with a lightning round. So Cam and I each prepare a question or activity, and the other person goes in blind and has to just answer on their toes. So Cam, why don't you start us off? What is your lightning round?
So Lexi, you in real life just found out you have to go back to work, right? For the first time. It's not even back to work. This is having to go to work, leaving your pink couch. What were the first thoughts racing through your mind when you found out you were leaving that pink couch and having to go into the office?
So this is a little bit long time coming for me because I knew that if I got the job, I would have to go back in person. So actually, I'm going to pedal it back to when the RTO announcement first came out in December of last year. That was when I had that initial, what the heck thoughts. And I can walk you through that. For me, the first thought through my head was the amount of money I would be losing, because I had said before the serving job, I was like, that is so much money that I'm not going to be able to make anymore. And that really bothered me. So I felt really disrespected and without answers, which was really frustrating as an employee at a company that I really liked. So that, and then, yeah, the concern about my quality of life changing. But also, and I think this comes with the territory of my degree in the arts, is that I'm always trying to consider all the different perspectives that are at play. For me, I don't really care about considering the perspective of the company because they're making money and they're fine. I'm more thinking about the perspective of what has been my reaction to things like this in the past and how do I usually react. And I think the first thing I landed on was I do have a tendency to react really passionately to change, and get really not worked up about it, but I have a lot to say about it and I'm gonna be bold in my thoughts about it. And I was trying to remind myself that I adapt. I always adapt. Like, things that were really scary at the beginning or really stressful or really bothersome at the beginning become things that I've adapted to because I have that power within me. And so I think it was a combination of all of those things, the negatives, and then also reminding myself that, meh, your normal will change and that's fine. You'll look back on it in a couple years and it won't really be something that's bothering you anymore. Kind of the essence of the episode, I guess, of what we've been looking at is, like, be critical of your situation, but also if you have to move forward in that direction, how do you do that and accept it?
Yeah, that's probably a fairly, well, I don't know if it's a typical reaction, but I imagine a lot of Gen Zs felt that, uh, if their companies seem to minimize something pretty major, that's not going to go over very well. So, yeah, but to your point, adaptability is the key, right? To try to deal with it the best way we can.
It's funny, my lightning round question is very similar to yours, as they often seem to be. But I wanted to ask you, so if you go back in your mind to when you were a 20 something entering the workforce, and if you were told that someone somewhere or some group somewhere was furious because they were just told that they would have to go in person to do their office job. If you heard that news, a whole group of people furious that they have to go in office to do their job, and you were sitting there with your 20 something brain and your experience at that point, what would be your reaction? How would you even process that given that social climate and what you were doing at the time?
It's a great question. Well, a question would pop up in my mind if I heard that. I would say, how the hell do they think they're going to work from home? Because we had computers, but there was no connection outside the company or anything. That would have been my first question. And I certainly would have looked down on them. Like, who do they think they are that they shouldn't come and join and do what we have to do every day? Those would have been the first thoughts that popped up into my mind. But I would have been it would have felt like futuristic or something, or just overly entitled, because I would never have seen the possibility to be able to do a full day's work from home. I can see doing, you're reading up on something, or you can do half a day's work from home, but I would never have believed when I was your age you could actually work from home.
So I asked that question because I wanted to show the kind of transition in mindset that we're working with between generations, because I think a lot of older generations and the people who are in those powerful management positions are thinking a lot like that, but today, and they haven't had the flexibility shift, fully realize the potential there is in work from home. And so it's created these kind of rifts between generations. And so I just wanted to flash back in time and show that those mindsets that a lot of the management is having is also rooted in their origins and where they started, and that they maybe can't conceptualize that it's possible even now. And so for them, it just makes sense. Whereas for me, and my default is, oh my gosh, are you kidding? I can do so much more work from home. Like, I can't even fathom why people wouldn't understand that. But there you go. Cam's perspective of if he was, operating 20, 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been that default mindset at all.
And you make a really good point there, because it's people my age and maybe even older making these decisions. I mean, I'm sure there's some younger people too, but there's entrenched people who would have thought, you can't do a full day work from home. You need someone looking over you. That was one of the things people used to say. And you couple that in with the corporate world where it's like, hey, we're paying a lease for that office building floor. I want to see it being used. But it's a counterproductive way of using it if it's overcrowded and people are having trouble having their own meetings. So yeah, there's that lack of flexibility in some people. We talked about flexibility earlier. It's that lack of flexibility, some people so entrenched in a way of thinking that rolls down and causes a lot of these issues. And you're absolutely right. It's people that have the mindset I used to have, that how could you even work from home? But that was a long time ago. That was pre-internet. So, life's different now and people can work from home. And we really have to ask, could this person do just as well from home as they could from the office? If the answer is unequivocally yes, why not let them work from home? And compromise one day a week or something like that. If the answer is no, they need to be in office, it's a face-to-face thing, then that's in the contract.
Why don't we wrap up there then? That is Cam and I's thoughts on the return to office policies that are rolling out. Hopefully, this gives you some positive ways to move forward and things that you might not have the agency to change, but also a reminder that if it's not for you and return to office is going to disrupt your life in ways that you're not ready for, there's lots of companies who are still experimenting with fully remote models, and those are options. You just have to reflect back on our priorities episode. You do just have to decide, where do your priorities lie and how dedicated are you to maintaining that work from home balance that you've fallen in love with in the past couple of years. So Cam, any closing thoughts?
Just want to thank you and thank our awesome listeners, and just say until next time.